Thank you. Good evening, and thanks very much for coming out on this miserable weather. Having enjoyed the sunshine for a few days, it's certainly a note. Um, so thank you very much for coming along. I'm just going to move along to agenda item number 1 and the apologies, and ask Democratic Services to confirm any apologies for this meeting, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just read out the housekeeping first. Please note that this meeting of the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council for a minimum of 6 months, Council website. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chairman in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by the way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the surface car park at the front of the annex. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you. And moving on to apologies, we've received apologies for absence from Councillor Cooper and Councillor Ball and Councillor Broadhead. And moving on to the second item, substitute members. Councillor Dower is substituting for Councillor Cooper this evening. Thank you.
And we've got Councillor Cameron Adams substituting for Councillor Broadhead as well. Thank you. So item agenda number 3, any declarations of interest. If any committee members have any declarations of interest, could they please indicate by using that raise hand feature. Thank you.
Hello, I know it's not on the agenda this evening, but I have a family member who is in the process of applying for an EHCP plan.
Thank you for that. And just, yes, sorry, Councillor Moriarty.
Sorry, just to say, I teach a lot of students with EHCPs and SEND generally, so that's fine.
Thank you. And just to confirm that I also have a family member on receipt of an EHCP. So the confirmation of minutes have been sent out. Unless anyone indicates otherwise, can we assume that the committee agrees to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on 6th of June 2023 as an accurate record, please? Yeah, it's not all around. Thank you very much. There is an action sheet. And at the moment, having looked through it, there's lots of officered notes, but there's no actual outcomes of what's happened with that piece of work. So unless anyone indicates otherwise, we'll assume that we agree to the action sheet as it stands, but actually outside of this meeting, have a look at that action sheet and just understand what's come about as a result of the actions that are on there, if that's agreed by everyone. Brilliant, thank you. Public issues, agenda item number 5. Ask the Democratic Services Officer if there's any public issues for this meeting.
There is, Chair. We have received a question from Mr. Adam Sofianos and a statement from Mr. Daniel Parkin. So if I could ask Mr. Adam Sofianos to come up first, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So my question, when it comes up, relates to educational psychologists and EHCPs, a subject raised in the committee paper. So a critical role of educational psychologists is around education, health and care plans, EHCPs. As already noted in the paper, demand for new plans has increased considerably, but staffing remains low. Now, the Council is working under the government's Delivering Better Value programme. It was recently revealed that this is delivered through a major consultancy contract with Newton Europe. It's reported to include a cost-saving target to reduce new EHCPs by at least 20%. Additionally, the Council has been invited to join the Safety Valve programme, which contractually binds councils to cost-saving targets and is also said to target EHCP reductions. Could you confirm what directions or recommendations were made arising from the current programme, including in the management plan? And could you reassure the many worried parents that any decision to join Safety Valve will be subject to proper scrutiny here and a full council vote, and that council will publish the draft contract and management plan beforehand. Thank you.
Thank you, and I believe we've got Councillor Burton to respond.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. The following details the actions and work streams for the dedicated school grant and the Delivering Better Value programme. Investment in delivering better value work streams to create capacity, including robust advice of parents, carers, professionals to stem the growth of EHCPs and improved implementation of graduated early support response. Planning capacity, the capital expansion programme and graduated pathway programme, which aims to improve the inclusions in mainstream schools and to increase the number of placements in BCP to reduce the demand of specialist settings. Dynamic EHCP support to improve timelines for new EHCPs and annual reviews of EHCPs. Embedding a structure of co-production so service delivery is driven by the lived experience of parents and carers and children and young people. The BCP Dedicated Schools Grant Management Plan set out the council strategy for reforming its high needs system, enabling it to function sustainably in the best interest of children and young people in the BCP area. Moving on to the Safety Valve programme. In August 2023, BCP Council were invited to join the DFE Safety Valve programme. The Safety Valve Agreement holds local authorities to account for the delivery of reforms to the high needs system so they can function sustainably and therefore in the best interest of the children and young people they serve. Those local authorities will be expected to reach an in-year balance on their dedicated school grant as quickly as possible and over time eliminate their deficits. Local authorities with Safety Valve Agreement are asked to focus on one mission statement: to develop plans to reform their high needs system as quickly as possible, provide a good service with their available funding. In addition, there are two principal goals which are critical for the local authority's ability to reach sustainable position, which are appropriately managing demand for EHCPs, including assessment process that are fit for purpose, and the use of appropriate and cost-effective provision. This includes ensuring mainstream schools are equipped and encouraged to meet needs where possible, whilst maintaining high standards for all pupils and reducing exclusions. To answer the last part of your question, the signatories on the agreement, if agreed, will be the Chief Executive, the Section 151 Officer and the Director of Children's Services. It is, however, the Chief Executive's decision. The financial impact of the safety valve will be scrutinised by the DFE, and the agreement will be between the DFE and BCP. I personally would hope that the effect of the decisions on the outcomes for young people will be scrutinised if this is accepted or turned down, whichever way. However, that comes to the committee. This committee is a request of members of the committee and ultimately the chair. This answer will be available online later.
Thank you. So just before you walk away, Mr. Sofianis, obviously that last part about whether or not it will come to this meeting, and it absolutely will come through to this meeting because it is a huge game change in terms of how service is going to be delivered and the impact it has for our children's outcomes and the parents who really worry about whether or not their children are getting the support that they need. And what I would say is, whilst we understand that programmes, etc., need to be put in place, it will not override the statutory duties that this local authority has to make sure that those needs are met through an EHCP or any other mechanism. So we will be bringing it to this committee so that it has. We have a starting point through our task and finish group that we're going to be putting in, and then we'll come to committee and we can measure therefore the outcomes. And also I think it will require some consultation with parents and those professionals that work within this environment as well. Thank you. So we have a statement which is going to be read out by Mr. Daniel Parkin. Thank you.
Evening. Daniel Parkin, trustee of Purbeck and Youth Community Foundation. We do look after 3 youth clubs, so I am quite passionate about bringing youth clubs into BCP, or particularly Bournemouth. The statement I'm making today is just my thoughts really, rather than looking at anything specific. And it starts with what's happening with the youth in BCP today. The least we can do is consider what we have done, think about these young children, current and previous, and what we can collectively do to help these children and turn their lives around. We being council staff, the public, and everyone in this room today. You have an opportunity here to make things happen. Some people accuse me of blaming the current administration. I'm not. I'm just challenging you all to improve the current Children's Services Department. We cannot have a situation where a resident is told one thing under a freedom of information request from the council, only to be told something completely different from a councillor in a council meeting. Who do we believe? And when the trust is gone, this seriously concerns me as to how our vulnerable children are being treated. As corporate parents, would that concern you? I hope it does, as these vulnerable children need your support now and for the rest of your term. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parkin. So we now move on to agenda item number 6, which I've really been looking forward to, and that's the Members of Youth Parliament annual report. So I invite them to come forward. I've just remembered, actually, I didn't do introductions, so if you don't mind doing some introductions when you present as well, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Cool. Perfect. Hi, so I'm Dylan, and we are the members of Youth Parliament along this lovely little table here. And although Zara and I have met some of you, we have our wonderful deputies here today, Annabelle and Hannah, and we wanted to update you on what we have done in the information packs, which should be on the agenda, but also what we plan to achieve in our next 6 months of our term. So we realised that we would have liked for our annual report to come in June, but due to exams and understandable school pressure, we requested to move it to now in September. I also wanted to say how brilliant it is that Youth Parliament now has a rolling agenda item on ONS, and we can't wait to update you with more soon. So although page 26 outlines some of the awesome events and activity we have been involved in, we are each going to take turns on taking you through our own personal campaigns, and I've had the kind of joy of being dobbed into going first. In the past 6 months, I've had a fantastic time as a member of Youth Parliament. In the last year, I've had the joy of campaigning, learning and progressing with my campaigns. And as shown under my campaign slot on page 27 in our little booklets, I've aimed to push more for elected member interaction with young people, including my elected member training session back in October 2022, which I hope to replicate later this year. I've also been elected to the role of Social Action Group member for the South West since January, where we have started to create a bill to go through the House of Commons around free school meal provision for young people under the Food for Learning campaign, which is the national campaign. This occurred after the House of Commons sitting, where we were invited to debate around health and well-being and what the national campaign for Youth Parliament should be, which concluded after numerous Zoom meetings as the Food for Learning campaign. More recently, in the last couple of months, I've developed my campaign around elected members further, and hope in the next couple of months to hold another elected member session around engagement with young people, similar to the one I carried out in October. I also am in the process of developing a debate with young people around the national campaign for Youth Parliament, which is free school meals, as I've mentioned, where I was hoping to get as many 11 to 18-year-olds in a room with interaction from elected members such as yourselves within the local area, whilst giving them an experience of debate. I'm really excited to push my campaigns forward into the last 6 months of my campaign, and I can't wait to progress in my role nationally with the Social Action Group and locally to show elected members how to interact with young people and the importance of our generation to the wider BCP population. And I think, who am I handing over to? Is it actually sat in the order? That was planned. Zara, handing over to you.
Hi, so I'm not going to bother introducing myself. It's done sort of fabulous job.
Thanks.
So as we said, page 26, you would have hopefully briefly looked over what I've been doing. So my 2 campaigns are based around neurodiversity and anti-bullying. Now I'm going to just go one at a time so we don't get mixed up. So when I started, it originally was going to be kind of undetermined what I wanted to do with this, but I knew the end result was going to be children who were neurodiverse and not neurotypical having far more support in schools, out of school, and in general, I think I've come up with a way to actually address that. So I'm not going to give you the ins and outs because Becky will get mad at me. But essentially, what I planned on doing is we've come up with a big project and we went through AUB. They didn't get back to us, like in here, but they did. And now I have the project and it's been finalised. We've actually went through the educational psychology team and they're going to just check everything over. But this project's actually based around anyone, not just neurodiverse people. However, it is strategically targeted for no in particular demographic, meaning that any person experiencing any one symptom can then treat it themselves outside of class barriers, parental barriers. It would just be a resource that they can go, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed, what can I do? And they look, there's like 3 or 4 different ways to treat that. This is anyone, but this will especially be a game changer, in my opinion, for children who are neurodiverse and have no access to materials or that they know of that can help them. So this will be launching in the next 6 months of my term, and I'm really excited because it will be all over BCP and even outside of BCP because we have lots of interest from people in a bunch of constituencies. So that's my neurodiversity campaign sorted out. We've all covered. My anti-bullying campaign. So this was originally going to be a relatively big project, but that ended up being pretty unachievable with schools, which is no one's fault. I went in really ambitious, and that tends to happen with being in NYP. But we've managed to hone it in a bit. So I'm meeting with the school's anti-bullying allegiance, and we're going to go through there. We're going to find data and what we're going to do because I really like maths. So they're going to find the primary issues in schools, and then with that information, I'm going to take that away, look over it, find the biggest point of, you know, meaniness, and make workshops around it for young people. And you know, again, this will be a primarily resource-based thing on like how to deal with these problems, and hopefully schools will be interested. We were going to do something around the Diana Award, but we don't have much information back on that, so I'm not going to tell you guys too much about it because I don't want to mislead anyone. And I do believe that is everything. So I'm going to hand away to my beautiful Halla over here, and you can hear her angelic voice for once.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm Hala Mafta. I'm a deputy member of Youth Parliament. My my campaign was originally to focus on on bringing equality for all minority students in terms of cultural and religious events. So basically, like being able to take time off of schools without having to like face. Most schools, you have to you only have to take like 1 or 2 days off, but most cultural events you need to travel for them, or they just take a lot longer. And schools don't allow that. So I've been trying to like bring awareness for the importance of these events in hopes of schools letting students take time off, obviously within reason. You can't take like 6 weeks off. So I first met with Councillor May Haynes to bring awareness to through basically cultural like foods and like the importance of it and the origins. Origins, is that the word? I don't know. But I tried to pilot that within my school, but they have like very strict like menus and guidelines, so that didn't really work out that well. But I did start the conversation. We also had a what's it called? It's like a global like club where you try foods. You can cook. So I did meet with them and I sort of spoke to the teacher, but since it's for younger year groups, I couldn't really take part of it. Um, and then I did a unconscious bias video with the Health Inequalities Partnership for a training program that they did, which like I think it was useful, hopefully. Uh, I also worked with the Sacra team, and I took part in the Holocaust Memorial Day, which was an absolute I'm really grateful for it. It was really nice to be able to connect with other people with the same like hopes as me. So I'm really grateful for that. And around mid-March, I think it was. I spoke to me and Becky recently. We spoke to a student from Bournemouth and Poole College who was hoping to create a culture day. We did exchange emails and like social medias and everything, but I haven't heard anything back from her yet. So let's hope she responds in the next 6 months. We also were provided with a Black Cherry, like the organization Black Cherry. We were provided with their details, and they're working on creating like a bunch of like cultural events, I'm assuming, but we also did not get a response from them. It's been months. But ultimately my campaign, I went in, as Zara said, very ambitious, and it was pretty big, so I had to like cut it down. But ultimately I did not achieve my actual campaign. I don't think I have many opportunities left to work towards it. But I am glad that I managed to start the conversation in multiple different places. But at the moment, I'm going to be focusing on helping the members of Youth Parliament with their campaigns. Thank you.
It's me to go last. So good evening, everyone. My name is Annabelle Hodges, and I'm also a deputy member of Youth Parliament. As it says on the agenda, which we wrote back in February, so I've got a bit of update since then. I've been in the process of planning my BSL, which stands for British Sign Language, workshops. These went ahead in July, and we ran 2 successful sessions, one in Poole and one in Bournemouth. I led these with a deaf young person, and because of the initial success of these workshops, we would like to discuss and talk about what we'd like to do as a next step. As we've had continued interest in running more of these sessions for different age groups in schools from counsellors and teachers. So that's the update on my BSL campaign. And then for my street harassment campaign, I've connected with multiple women's charities, and I was asked to be on board committee with Women Action Network Dorset, but I felt like it would be difficult to deliver my campaign through that as young people, not the main focus. So I joined with an international youth-led organisation called Chalkback, who might have seen some of their activism in the form of chalk messages, writing experiences of street harassment on the streets. And I ran this project last week, as you might have seen. And I was lucky enough to be featured on some media, so Heart Capital and BBC Solent Radio. I was on BBC South Live, and I'm also on their Instagram, and I'm also on BBC News. So if you're interested, you can have a look. And I feel very grateful that I was able to do that. And we talked at 3 different locations in Bournemouth. We talked at Bournemouth train station, Bournemouth Triangle, and Bournemouth Square. So we tried to spread it out around Bournemouth as possible, and we did forms leading up to it to get young people's experiences of street harassment. We ended up getting a range of experiences from all different ages, which was amazing and also really, really upsetting. And we ran workshops prior to this to discuss what the best way to go around it was. So we feel very prepared in that sense. And my next steps with this campaign is we're looking to chalk again, hopefully, because everyone who I've spoken to in the media have been really supportive over my campaign, and it's been amazing to see. And also I'm still working with Arts University Bournemouth, as is Zara, in terms of creating resources for people who've experienced street harassment, and what to do when you have been street harassed. So, and we're looking into hopefully connecting with them and releasing our information resources within the next 6 months. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a whistle stop tour of our Youth Parliament campaigns, and we are more than welcome to answer any questions that you guys have.
So much, and I don't know if as parents we obviously all feel pride in our children, but reading the report you feel that same degree of pride and just think, cool, we are really bringing up some wonderful young people in our town. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, no, thank you. Seriously. Just going through the paper, one of the recommendations is that the board support the intended activity and outcomes. And I don't know if, like yourselves, there was things going on saying actually we could link in here and hook in there. And so that seems like perhaps the obvious place where perhaps we could start the conversation. But of course, if there's any questions, then by way of hands, thank you so much.
First of all, thank you so much. Like Bobby said, are so inspired. I've got young children, and if they can see people your age going out and putting their hearts and souls into things like this, it takes a lot. I find it difficult to speak in front of them for people, so I'm so impressed. I'm really mindful that your terms are coming to an end fairly soon. In the next 6 months, if you could have a wish list, for me, I'd like to know what that is. What could we do to make those 6 months really count, be really impactful? I think about things like having our email addresses, being able to contact us. I'm currently working with a secondary school in my ward to set up a youth surgery. So we do surgeries every month. We are setting up a youth surgery so the
I
children
would
in that
love to
school
be
can come
involved
talk.
in that. That would be amazing.
Amazing.
That'd be
Well,
brilliant.
I will get your email and talk to you about that. And my other question, and obviously email, I'm happy to give my email and anything, because I'm so passionate about ensuring youth voice is heard. I feel that we project so much onto the youth are not doing good things, and this is what people need to see, and because it's so important. And my other quick question is a wish list. When you started, think about those incoming people in March. What would your wish list have been then? Can you tell us, so when they come, we are ready for them and we can start this, on a really amazing trajectory soon?
I think I can put it all in an email to you as well. But I think just to start with, I don't know, when we came into office, we I don't know, I remember the first time we went to an M&S and it seemed a bit intimidating. And it was great. I mean, Richard Burton over there was amazing at easing us into it. It was brilliant. But I think what I'd ask of elected members is that you just help them in any way that you can. I'm talking about, emailing them, helping them with their campaigns. I think it's so easy for us to sit here and say, yeah, we'll do that. I'm a prime example of this. It's so easy to sit there and go, oh yeah, I'll do that. That's fine. And then you realize that actually time moves quite quickly. I think just any way that we can interact with young people is incredible. Like the youth surgery, that's amazing. But just we are in the loop, and we want to know your opinions on our campaigns, how you can help us. We've set these things up that we're looking to progress with. Now it's just about actually how can we communicate with you guys to best put that out. Does anyone else have a thing to say about that?
Like Dylan said, please just throw yourselves at them. It doesn't sound like much, but when you go into this, for starters, you're going into a room of adults, and I didn't know anything about politics when I started, and I mean, I can't stress that enough. I didn't even know what Labour meant. Like, I, I was so clueless, and I mean, that's obviously just a testament to how little is taught in, especially low-income areas. Like, I don't let it be a secret that I come from a relatively deprived area, so that's one of the reasons I definitely got into this, because I wanted a demographic that just simply wasn't heard to be heard. Um, this is such a great thing of viewing scrutiny, because it allows young people to have actual input on things that are going to directly affect them. Like, we've had stuff on county lines be spoken about. We've had everything from children in care to things that go on in schools, and these are all things that primarily will affect young people. And yet, more often than not, it's people over the age of 30 who are making these decisions. And while, don't get me wrong, it's amazing because most of you guys have kids, or most of you know what's going on, but there are no actual young people who can go around and they can be like, I've had something similar happen, I know how it went down, this didn't work. But the adults won't know that, because your kids aren't going to come and tell you, like, hey, this weird thing that happened in school today and I don't think it was very good. But the young people, they do know. And the resources you all have, it will be small stuff like connections. Like me, I had to contact the with Becky, the educational psychology team, and I mean, I have to get everything checked. Like, I went into doing my project thinking everything wrong with it. I had to scrutinize the hell out of it because schools are so picky. But if you have somebody like on the interview and scrutiny board looking at the project saying, I don't think that'll work, or I don't think that'll get approved, or do you know what, I know someone who works around this specifically who would be a great help, that can make all of the difference, especially if you're going into this feeling like, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm way out of my depth. Like, every single NYP I have spoken to has spoken about an innate imposter syndrome with the role, because it just feels like such a big role to fill, and you're just a normal person who was like, do you know what, yeah, I'll run for youth parliament, because not everyone goes into this thinking, I want to make a difference. they obviously will, and they will end up going to make a difference, and they don't realize how big of a difference it is. But some people just do it for a laugh, realize, oh my god, this is so much, and I can do so much with this, and they go on, and it changes you as a person. Your public speaking improves. Like Hannah, for example, sorry to put you on the spot. She was so scared when she first came. When she first started talking, she was so scared. Like she was basically asking for help with her eyes. And now she's just and she's just done that whole thing, and she spoke eloquently. She got to the point, and she said all of these great things she's done, and it just, I can't stress enough how great and important this is, and for you guys to please, 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 even if you don't think what you're doing personally pertains to their campaign, just giving out your email can be so helpful. Like literally something as small as an email, because if they think, hey, I need some support, you could just email your elected member and you might know someone who can help them. And even just involving them, like, hey, do the Youth Parliament have anything to say about this agenda item? So they actually have an opening to speak, so they don't feel like, oh, should I ask a question? Is this the right place? It's just really little stuff that we really appreciate. Like, this panel is so much, I'm not going to say better, because I'm not saying better, but I'm saying way more involved with us than they were before. And getting the rolling agenda item is such a huge deal, and it's now going to enable the young people next term to have these opportunities that we may not have had at the beginning. I'm going to stop talking now. But seriously, throw yourselves at the guys. They'll be scared at first, but they will appreciate it down the line. Thank you.
So just on that, sorry, Emily, I will come to you. Will there be a handover period? Like, so I'm well aware you're obviously coming to that time when you're going to be doing mocks and exams and everything as well, but will there be some kind of basic experiences of this term and bedding in the next crews that come in?
So yeah, as part of recruiting our new members of Youth Parliament, we run workshops in January, which is like an introduction to Youth Parliament, which hopefully at least one or two of these will be at each one of those. So it's an opportunity for them to find out about it. And there's like a job description stuff that their parents or carers have to consent for, and they do as well in terms of this is what they're signing up for. As also, while they're deciding to stand, there's a like introduction to campaigning, where again, these members of Youth Parliament will share their experience. We'll also invite elected members along to that, because obviously you've successfully campaigned and are sat round as elected members. But that opportunity for them to also think about if they're elected, because they'll often start with very big statements like, I want to do something on mental health or whatever. So it's putting them in touch early with the right people. And then, yeah, there will be a handover once they're elected, for as long as these guys want to sort of be involved. They all of these four come to the youth forum, and they don't automatically stop coming to the youth forum. So that's open to any young person, and that's a way of sort of supporting them through that. So yeah, and obviously that's my part of my role, to ensure that they're sort of inducted in and know what they're doing as well. So they'll get me.
Emily's been waiting quite a while, so Councillor Harman.
Thank you. Just to reiterate what my colleagues said, it's been an absolute pleasure listening to you guys talk with so much passion about your campaigns and what you've achieved. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. There's something you mentioned in your report, one of the things that you've been up to, that I'm just a little bit curious to know a bit more about, if that's okay. As a former teacher, what gets taught in schools and what's on the curriculum is of particular interest to me. And you spoke about, it was on page 25 of the report, that you said you developed a survey for PSHE leads to understand inclusion of democracy and voting systems. And I'm curious to know a little bit more about what your conclusions from that survey were. Also, do you feel that democracy and participation is well catered for in schools? If yes, what are they doing that's great? And if not, what could they do better? Thank you.
I think that comes under my campaign. We ran the PSHE surveys a while ago, actually now, it's last year. I think our biggest conclusion was that PSHE curriculums aren't, they're just not teaching enough about politics. Even the teachers that know, the functions of politics, the basics of British democracy, it just isn't talked about. I could go to school and I could say, how many of you know what BCP council is? I can guarantee you, like probably a decent 70% of them would struggle. It is a problem. So I think, but I also think it's really difficult in this current political climate, and with everything happening at the minute, to actually make the change to bring into PSHE curriculums education around politics. But it's possible. I think there needs to be a lot of talk with Sarah Rempel and the Children's Services. Oh man, sorry, I'm very tired. Children's Services to kind of like, push that forward. But it's just how we go about creating those curriculums that's quite difficult. Um, you know, I've been trying to run different workshops in my school, but even I'm struggling to. I know my head teacher personally, but I'm still struggling to push stuff through just because of how difficult it is to talk about political education without people worrying that it's going to be politically biased and that kind of thing.
Just as a sort of follow up, did you feel the appetite was there to do it? It's just a case, because again, thinking back to my teaching days, it's often there's just too much to fit in. You as a teacher, you want to be teaching these things. Did you find from talking to the teachers and professionals, the appetite's there to do it? It's just tricky because of all the other things that need fitting in.
Absolutely. Like, I talked to my head teacher, my politics teacher, they're thinking, yes, absolutely, we need to teach our Key Stage 3 kids this. But it's so difficult to do. I think United Learning have two of the schools down, few schools down here, and it's difficult to kind of infiltrate those systems and say this is what we need to teach. This is, for me, as much as it's a BCP issue, it's a national issue as well, and that then makes it really difficult and opens up a whole different kind of fish. I'd love to look at it further, but I've only got 6 months left. And hopefully, a new NYP goes, yeah, let's take this further, try and get some proper political education, because it's a big passion of mine. I'd love to see it. But if there's one campaign that you want to run and try your best to try and push within children's services, it would be for me looking at political education and how we put it in our secondary schools and BCP. That'd be amazing.
Thank you. As always, I always have lots to say, obviously, as you know. So I hope you don't mind if I just do a whistle-stop tour of some things that you pointed out. There was one point, I think, Dylan, it was yours, and it was capital letters, and we love Kathy Hadley. So I think I'd like to say on behalf of this panel, thank you very much. It's always nice to get an endorsement like that, and perhaps our senior leadership team don't get enough at times. It's a bit of a battleground, so thank you very much for that. I think what I noticed was you've got this connection into this committee, but there's a disconnect with all of the work that the rest of the council are doing. And when I was looking through all the protected characteristics that were being mentioned about BSL, LGBTQ networks, neurodiversity, and we've just rolled out a neurodiversity training program for staff, is the fact that we just didn't think about coming to yourselves, and you're doing this work in tandem but not with. So I therefore wondered, with your permission, if you wouldn't mind me raising this at the staff network groups, because they are the representative groups of the council made up of staff but also go out into communities. And the Women's Network group, for example, came up post Sarah Everard, and it's exactly that. It's that low level stuff that everyone kind of dismisses but has a huge impact, be it within the workplace or on the street. And then also, Hala, your unconscious bias video, I wondered therefore if I could contact you with Black History Month coming up. It just feels like it's the sort of thing that perhaps, with your permission, we could put on the on the website or something and start getting that out there, because these pieces of work are going on. You've worked so hard, but it can't just stop here. It needs to filter out, not just amongst our youth and young people, but actually to us as parents as well, if that's okay.
If you're okay, I'd absolutely love to jump on that whole training thing. And keep in mind, we do actually continue, some of us, to be activists after we're in NYP. We just can't come to things like the committee meetings, and we don't have, well, Becky. So you can still contact us outside of this, after this, if you still want our input, because I know for a fact I myself, I'm not going to stop after my term ends. So all of this stuff will be helpful, especially if the future MIPs want to do the same as I do. But I'm gonna stop.
There was one question that really sprang out, and I love the whole youth parliament movement, and it's coming, and the traction it's getting nationally, and the recognition it's getting nationally. What I noticed, Kathy, though, was it stops at 18, and of course, for many of our young people, we work right the way up to 25, and certainly for our care leavers beyond that. So, what do we have in terms of engagement post 18? And I'm just wondering, even if it's not nationally, whether there's a place for previous members of Youth Parliament to continue.
I would have to go away and find that out, because obviously this is a particular scheme, national scheme, not for care leavers or children in care particularly, but we do a lot of work and consultation and participation with children in care and care experienced young people, and there is a lot of work and joint work that's been done with the members of youth parliament as well as children in care and care experienced, and so we don't hold in different groups, we do join them together, but I will leave that with Becky, I'm afraid, to go away and find that out for us, but there's no reason why we can't consider it, but I presume that because it's a national scheme it stops at 18 because they see that as a sorry Becky, you want to come in?
Yeah, so in terms of for members of Youth Parliament particularly, they can go on and become part of the national steering group, so they can be in that till they're older, or they can become part of the board of trustees for that. So that's particularly for sort of that cohort to progress with. Then there's a range of other sort of national opportunities. So some of our care experienced young people have sort of joined the National Care Leaving Benchmarking Forum, and the Council for Disabled Children stuff have opportunities up to the age of 25. So we get a lot of those national opportunities come through that we put out to the wider group, not just our members of Youth Parliament. So within BCP, we've got one of our care leavers is on the National Benchmarking Forum. We've got a couple of she might have left care now, but just 17 going 18, and another one on the Family Youth Justice Board, so there's those opportunities to do stuff nationally. We've got a young person who's a member of the Youth Forum on the Home Office Youth Forum, looking at sort of that, and a young person who's a young mentor with the Anna Freud institution, I think, in terms of their peer mentoring. So there's lots of wider opportunities. Obviously Youth Parliament is a sort of national one that we really support locally, but we also promote all of those opportunities, and I'm often emailing some of the young people who are now in their mid-20s sort of with the opportunities around the boards and stuff that come up for older. So yeah, it's not a natural continuum, but by being part of particularly the British Youth Council, you get a lot of other things come back out to you. Annabelle, did you want to say something as well?
Yeah, I was just gonna add on a point you said earlier about the like committees, about like the women's committee in the council. I've already been lucky enough to be contacted. I had interest by them in terms of my street harassment, but it'd be amazing to, of course, do more.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And we could talk about this for much longer, I'm sure. But the recommendations are for the board to note the information provided in the report, and the board also to support the intended activity and outcomes outlined in 2023. And of course, I think that's a given. Please do at any time pick up the phone or email us for anything that we can assist with, particularly if you do have a bit of a blockage. I think we're always happy to lean in. We've got ward councillors everywhere, including obviously in the wards where we have the universities, so they'll have those contacts if you need those helps. I just wondered, with the board's permission, if we could also add a vote of thanks and recognition of the hard work that's being carried out, and really endorse all their efforts, please. Everyone's happy with that? Thank you. Thank you. So agenda item number 7. Sorry, my computer keeps switching off. I need to keeps going to go to sleep. So it's the Children's Services Workforce Overview, which is a this, I think we kind of looked for a theme in terms of all the work that's going on with the inspections, etc. And this was really a cultural piece about where our staff are and how they're feeling, how they're valued, because We know that the retention is the key, and through the retention, we're going to be getting better outcomes for our children and young people. So if I can invite you to start the
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, as you say, this was brought about on the back of, workforce. A skilled, a stable workforce is the backbone of any improvement journey that one would wish for across Children's Directorate. And obviously, when you have a inadequate judgment and you begin to move from inadequate, what happens is you become slightly a flight risk, and outwardly people see you as an unattractive proposition to work with. And so in December, when we had that ILAC, and also from January when I arrived, we had a considerable amount of agency staff. I think the split agency to permanency was around 30% permanent and 70% agency staff. And when we look at where those agency staff were, if you hone down into different services, we were looking at our really risk areas with high agency right at our front door. What I would like to say that we have always put this front and centre into our improvement journey. And of course, it takes time to turn that around. And so we have put a lot of effort into working this through the system. And I can say I am confident that we have turned a corner. There's still a lot more work to do, but we have turned a corner. The senior leadership team are all permanent, apart from my esteemed colleague Sarah Scoley, who is obviously interim. But Sarah has provided great stability, and you'll see from a monitoring visit report that we're coming to later. Sarah has steered the ship extremely well and has been with us for a year, and is what I would call a very committed person to this role, and we're currently recruiting to that post. As we work through our service managers and team managers, I think we're probably up to about 85% of permanency in those areas. What that does is, through leadership and the permanency of leadership, it begins to build a culture. This is the way we do things around here, and also begins to set a culture. And obviously what we needed to do is set a culture of high expectation, high praise, and a learning culture. And so we've done a lot of work around that. We've also done a lot of work, which if you look at page 36, there's a list of areas that we have done to support our recruitment around a pay review for all social work staff. So we initially were not paying staff a competitive rate for social workers, and therefore that was worked through, and that was paid in January 2023. This has made quite a significant difference and been very appreciative by the staff to be seen as something that indicates their value. We've had a caseload strategy, because one of the things staff told us was the fact that they were overworked, they felt overwhelmed, and so we had a caseload strategy, and we have been working very hard against that, and we assure ourselves through quality assurance processes and frameworks as to whether we are meeting those in individual teams. Now, there are times when we go over that, but that may be because of sickness or vacancies, etc. So we still hold ourselves to that. We now have a really strong grow your own in several areas, and you'll hear about educational psychology in a minute. And we have we have changed the competitive pay offer for our grow our own. And so you will see later on, we've had quite a doubling in terms of the number of applicants for our ASYEs. We also have introduced the smarter working. This is along with the corporate centre, so where you work, how you work, the hours you work, on teams, etc., which has also benefited the work-life balance for some of our workers. And I would say there are, in children's services, there are roles that are not a 9 to 5. They definitely aren't. We've also, because BCP, where it is, the cost of housing, etc., we have also supported staff in terms of accommodation during those, especially around summer periods, where the cost of rents and the costs of hotel rooms rockets. And so we have supported some of that. And we do offer a relocation package at £8,500, which is attractive. So we continue to have this relentless look at recruitment, and you will see on the top of page 37, if you look at where our rise in permanent appointments for team managers 61%, assistant team managers 81%, and our social workers at 18%. Our total, we've risen from 46% in permanent appointments to 62. We've now come to September 62%, and our ratio I think is around 62 permanent staff against a 48. And so we really can see that we've begun to turn that tide. And as you bring in more permanent workers, it spreads, doesn't it, about what the culture's like, about what it's like to work here. If we go on to the stability and the retention, because it isn't all about recruitment. Once you've got people in through the door, we like to hold on to them and ensure that we are doing the best for them. And we've listened to staff about exit interviews, about how the things that we can do to support them to stay. And if you look at the table on page 38, you can see our turnover in January 22 was 44%, and it is now down to 22%. Obviously more to do, but that's a significant drop. And then if you look at the number of sick days lost, there was 461, there's now 181. And so I can, at this point where we're at, and there's always things that can happen, it feels as if we've confidently turned the tide. We do have areas where we're still more at risk. So in the paper, it does outline that in some services, we almost have 100% permanent staff. But again, in some of like assessment, I think it's still around about 42, I think. So we're not going to take our foot off the pedal around this children's social care element, and we will work very, very hard. If just in context for recruitment, in October 22 to January 23, we only managed to recruit a 0.5 social worker post, whereas you think what we've recruited since January, that's quite a phenomenal number. And part of that is because of what we've done internally, but also some of the work we've done with community care, which is the trade magazine and the trade area in that space. Then if we go on to education and skills workforce, one of the areas we have the biggest issue with, which I know a lot of you will be aware, which is also a national issue, is the recruitment and retention of educational psychologists, and that's both nationally and locally, and that's causes us considerable pressure, and it's something that we do need to consider and look at. And some of that is about the differences in the way that people work. EPs sometimes like to work with agencies, and there isn't enough to go around. But there is a national approach by the government in terms of how to recruit more educational psychologists, and that was published in a report in June 23 from the government. It found that 88% of local authorities reported they were experiencing difficulties in recruiting staff, EP staff, and 34% reported they were experiencing retention issues. One of the areas that we've worked on in our EP services is again that grow your own, and so we do have EP assistants who are coming to work with us, who are trainees, who then hopefully by being within the service will then aspire to continue to work with us. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. And quick off the mark, Councillor Martin.
Yeah, thank you for that. Nice, sort of really encouraging to read lots of the areas that you've highlighted, and particularly with where the journey started. As you though rightly acknowledge, still some work to do, but I like to highlight things green and smiley faces on things that I read, and it's good to add those. So yeah, good stuff. Do you have a few questions that I just, as I say, like to pose, and just so I can understand it a bit further, if that's okay. We talked about grow your own ASYE, and I'm just mindful of the challenges with resourcing that we've raised in the Spray report. What sort of support, mentoring do they get, bearing in mind the challenges that they have?
I will outline it, but my learned colleague Juliet may be able to give more specifics. But they get a training. There is also, they have a reduced caseload. So if we have an ASYE within the service, we then also alongside that have a 0.5 member of staff that picks up some of the work, and so they're supported in terms of their caseload. They also have particular training which then they have to meet particular standards. Juliet, can you give a better outline than I?
Do my best. They have workforce development supporting them as soon as they come into the system. They then have experience in different teams, so they get a taste of what it's like. All teams are different, all services are different, so they're able to try things out, you know, whether they fit, and then they have to respond to those standards that are set for us by Social Work England. So of course they make sure that they meet all of those, and they undertake the same mandatory training as everyone else. If for whatever reason the caseload goes above where we'd wanted to be for an ASYA, workforce development are really good at challenging the services to say, why is this? We've got to support this worker. So I think they are really well supported. Most of them stay with us, which is telling you that they're well supported in terms of what we're doing. So it's a really beneficial scheme.
Thank you. And in that vein, around the same in terms of the grow your own element, obviously you highlighted the report found that 88% of local authorities reported that they were experiencing difficulty recruiting staff. This is EPs. And this paper talks about the suggestion to use the assistant EPs. Now, I know there's been some success by all accounts of the fact that this month we've got 2 assistant EPs hopefully converting to EPs. Again, I just want to understand what an assistant EP's role is. So in terms of, you know, how much involvement have they got? You know, are they carrying out assessments? If so, the risks associated with that, just understanding where the line splits and where the role sits exactly.
So they will be taking part in their training, and so therefore anything that they will be doing will be supported by a trained EP. So they will never be left alone to do an assessment, sign off an assessment. It's almost like work experience, and so we protect them in that manner. And again, it's very similar. We want to introduce them to the work. We want to excite them about the work. We don't want to overload them and overburden. And so I don't think we do not take the approach that they are just an extra pair of hands, because that is not going to get us to where we need to be. And so we need to grow them and grow their experience. And again, anything that they do within the service will also support them in terms of their training.
Lastly, talk a bit about the budget. And 47.7 million. Is there any idea of the projected budget for 24-25 at all?
Off the top of my head, I need to go away and get the definite figures, but there will be with any budget around staffing, there will be staffing increases in terms of cost of living, etc., that will be applied. But against that, there will be the issues about, well, how do you manage your budget, and are there things that you can do differently? And so, but we can get you those figures. It's no problem.
The only thing I thought just to highlight is, as well, Chair, if that's okay, was just around referring back to Mr. Sofianos' question earlier on. And for me, this report clearly outlines resourcing. That's exactly what the report is designed to do. And maybe I should be bringing this up a little bit later on in terms of the forward plan, but I'd quite like to understand the SEND service and how we are delivering at the moment. And I'd love to see that on the agenda if possible moving forward. But referring back to, say, Mr. Sofianos' question, and I think, forgive me for misunderstanding if I have done, but it sounded like Councillor Burton was saying that actually when we talked about the safety valve, that wasn't necessarily something that needed to go to committee, but it could be based on Mr. Farrett's prerogative signature sign off. But quite rightly, clearly, you called it, I think you called it a game changer, Chair, that you felt that obviously that would be essential to bring it to committee. That the only bit that I failed to understand, and I apologise, was, you know, would we be bringing this to committee before decisions are made around this or after? Because from my perspective, I feel like we should be having our say on this before any decisions are made. And I'll leave that there, Chair. Thank you.
You've absolutely raised points that I've raised both with the leader of the council and with the portfolio holder for children's services, and the fact that the children's chair or any member representative of this group is excluded from that SEND improvement journey, so that have that independent scrutiny. And John Coughlin is brilliant. You know, it's really good working on behalf of the DFE. Perhaps potentially the DFE's priorities are different to that of families and of their parents. And I think the quote was, "We're going to provide a good service within the funding available." My scrutiny would be around how you're still going to meet your statutory obligations without cutting corners on those. So that's the area that I think perhaps we need to chat more about in our forward work plan meeting. But yeah, you raised some really good points. And thank you for your questions. Are there any other questions from the floor from our youth parliament at the moment? Councillor Harman.
Thank you. And I apologise. I'm going to be not facing you as I ask my question because of the microphone. So just as has been mentioned, the report mentions a lot of positive things the council are doing and already offering that support the recruitment and retention of staff. And also it mentions staff morale is improving, which is fantastic. My question is, are we moving fast enough? If not, what are the barriers to moving with more pace?
I think from January 23, when we were able to offer a change in pay offer, I think the pace has absolutely rocketed. I think before then, I think we were having some real challenges. There have been some, and we've also changed processes in terms of how we interview people, the CVs. It's not a lengthy process. Things come in very quickly. We interview within a week, you know, so we have literally changed a lot of things to be able to do things pretty fast. And so I think the pace has picked up. I think what we need to be mindful of is there's always, as soon as you advertise something and something looks really good, everybody comes in and applies, and then there's a plateau, isn't there? And so for me, there's that challenge about how do we keep it up there. And so I think that is the question I would like to make sure that we retain. But the current run rate of community care, the adverts, everything, our ability to get social workers in is a lot better than it's been since I've been here, since January.
I did have another question. On page 34, in the section about developing the workforce and talking about the culture, paragraph 18 talks about the manager's report that leadership stability is now giving them confidence that new practices being put in place are here to stay, and that change fatigue is something in the past. But then paragraph 19 says they also feedback that communication is not yet what it needs to be, but has improved. So I just wanted a bit of clarity on that. Why is the communication not yet what it needs to be, and what plans are in place to address this? And sort of as a bit of a follow-up, in your view, what would good communication look like in this context?
Yeah, absolutely. And one wasn't saying they weren't challenging each other, those two comments. And so I think there's confidence that we're seeing in terms of, from a variety of spaces where the narrative is the culture feels as though it's changing, and the culture's changed through the Ofsted reports, through the way that staff are challenging each other in terms of the work, raising the quality of work, and so having a pride in work, the progress forum, surveys. And so those things are telling us that there is a swell of change in terms of how staff are feeling. The fact people are staying, you know, the fact we've now got permanent stuff, that again says the culture feels as though it's changing. Communication is really difficult sometimes to because it's about how do you ensure that people stay informed, and how they absorb information, or they go and find information. And if we think about it, we all do it differently, don't we? So I might read a magazine, but Sarah might think that she wants to send a letter into it. So you participate in communication and information gathering in different ways, and everybody's style is different. Someone might, I don't know, like social media, someone likes books or newspapers. And so how do we make sure we target everybody so there is that? And so we now have just recently we have a dedicated children's communication officer, who we didn't have before. So I would say we had lots of different types of communication, lots of different newsletters, but where is our, and some of our transformation work, we didn't have a dedicated communication space for that. So all of that is now being put into a strategy, understanding our stakeholders, who we need to communicate and how we're going to communicate with them. So there's some work happening in that area. I think it's also about how do we enable people to understand that they are a channel of communication and they can go and find communication, and where is it, and so how do we help people take some ownership around that as well. So all of that is happening, and we hopefully that will be we will be able to get that more ingrained into the lifeblood of the service.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, with discussion of recruitment and retention, obviously Sarah Scully has been a great addition to your team. For me, with regard to recruitment of the new corporate pairing and permanence post, do you feel we are at a point now where we are going to have a good field of candidates that apply for it? You know, is it our internal candidates, or, you know, are we at a point where you feel that that's going to be a role that's going to be really well applied to?
Absolutely. So we're working with a resource agency because we want to go as wide and as we can. And I would say that we have had a lot of interest both internally and externally, and so I am confident that we will be able to do it. We need to find the right person, the right fit, and somebody who's going to complement and lean into and use the work that Sarah has done as grip to take us forward.
I thought and thought and thought about how to phrase this, and Kathy, you've known me for a long time now, so you know I tend to just call a spade a spade. And I've really tried to be constructive in how I phrase this, and I just cannot find a way. But having been planning PFH and having the whole, you know, echo articles about people working from home and everything else, and I assumed naively that social working was a frontline job. So I just wondered if you could explain to me, please, how you reach that balance and how we're recruiting where it requires people to come in on a more of an ad hoc basis. It's the more reassurance rather than I'm pointing fingers and I'm not complaining that anyone's working from home.
And I actually think that's a really, really good question, because I think if you think about where we were in COVID, everybody was at home. We also were in a situation where we were recruiting staff from wherever because we could do that at that time. We then wanted people to come back into the room and to meet families face to face. You then realise that you might have staff who are in London who only want to be here 2 days a week, you know, and what's acceptable. And so as a senior leadership team, we had that discussion about what was acceptable and what wasn't. And in actual fact, you are absolutely right. Social work is face to face. There's an element of report writing and things like that and record keeping, but it is ultimately responsive and face to face. And that's what we want for our children and young people. And so that is the philosophy and the mantra of the senior leadership team. There are probably people who still come in from outside, you know, London and whatever, but we would want them to be in the space and face to face. We do not accept people who would not come in, who sit at home. That's not how we do our work. So we do manage and monitor that. And obviously you're always in that transition period, aren't you, where you've gone from one situation and you're moving to another, which is where we are. I would like to say it's key for me. It's key for me. Know when to be in the room, know when you have to be face to face, and it isn't about what's best for you as the worker. It's about what's best for the person that you're serving, your children and young people. And so there's a lot of work and conversation that goes on with that. And I would say for children's services, if you come and visit us on floor 2, we are probably one of the noisiest floors with most people in it, you know, because we're very social people, I think. But I think that mantra's coming through.
Thank you. And of course, it brings about the obvious benefits of recognising burnout. There's some very difficult jobs that they have to get involved with, so having that peer support, that culture that we require. Thank you very much. Is there any other questions at this moment? So it's recommended that this is a report for information and scrutiny. I note that Councillor Martin has raised some actions which we can discuss in our forward work plan meeting. But again, very many thanks to all of the staff who are doing a very difficult job. We know that we only hear about the very, very worst jobs when they've gone wrong in the press, but let's understand that they do such a good job across the board. So thank you very much. Next, we have agenda item number 8, Ofsted monitoring report, the visit number 4 of 6, hopefully, and that's the children in care. And again, I invite Kathy Hadley to present that report.
Thank you. I'm going to share the presentation with my esteemed colleague Sarah, but I'll start it off. As you've just pointed out, this is absolutely monitoring visit number 4. And so it usually Ofsted from an inadequate judgment will do 6 monitoring visits, and they do it following the journey of the child, and it's like a deep dive into particular services. So this monitoring visit number 4 was about children in care. We have now had the formal letter from Ofsted, which you'll find in your pack. And we have also put in the pack a presentation, which I will run through. But obviously, this monitoring visit, as I said, it was children in care and long-term care, looking at permanency. So they found the areas of recruitment and retention. There was experienced and competent and confident to deliver improvements, and so children no longer have multiple changes of social worker or personal advisor. These are the things that they were concentrating on. They were looking at about recruitment and retention, and has that had an impact on children's changes in social workers. The quality of practice, looking at assessment, planning, emotional support to children in care, and recording children's views. Are we listening to the voice of the child in the things that we do and deliver? And they wanted to know the impact of any quality assurance and management oversight on the standard of social work practice. So what difference did our quality assurance activities make to the lives of children and young people? And how did we progress the work? Did we progress it in a timely way? And did we avoid delays for children in terms of planning and decision making? And then the consideration of securing a permanent home for children in care. And so making that a legal permanence in terms of identifying where they're going to live. So some of the headlines, they felt that significant progress had been made in establishing a plan for permanence for all children in care. So we have a plan that we work to. They felt there was purposeful leadership. And importance of children having a stable and long-term homes is now discussed, and making sure that is key to the work that we do. They felt the quality of our social work is more consistent, and high levels of communication and passion from staff to get things right for children. So really, really looking at what is it that we need to do for children and getting that right. And they also felt that the financial backing to continue the positive momentum from the corporate centre and the administration was a really positive mood and message to children's services and the staff. I'm going to pass over to Sarah, who will go into a bit more detail in terms of the specifics.
Thanks, Kathy. So when we're looking in further detail in terms of what this means for our children and young people, inspectors found that the majority of our children in care live in stable homes, and that compares well against regional and national averages. So when we look at our numbers and compare to what other local authorities are doing, we do have a high proportion of children that are looked after primarily in foster placements, which I think it's really positive, positive and encouraging. Looking at practice fundamentals, so really taking a back to basics approach with staff looking at what's important. So visiting children, the quality of that work, making sure that staff are supervised and supported. Ofsted saw a real positive difference in terms of where we were in March to where we were in August. So social workers knowing their children well, so having those discussions with Ofsted, bringing children to life, knowing the details, what's important to the children that we look after, and being able to advocate on their behalf, but also having those high aspirations which are really important for children and young people as well. So making sure that children are visited, and actually inspectors were seeing that where there was a need for a child to be seen more, we were responsive to that as well. When we're writing and recording about children, much more detail going into those records, and actually when we're recording that information, it's written directly to the child as well. Really important, I think, for when our children reach adulthood that may want to come back and look at their records, that details there, they're able to understand the decisions and their life story, really their history. So it's really encouraging that we're seeing that detail, but that practice becoming more commonplace across the service. So we're planning for children, and that we're reviewing those plans regularly as well. So plans that are intuitive to children's needs, that they're not static, and that there's not drift around what we need to be doing for children and young people. Within our recordings, so ensuring that children's wishes and feelings, voices and lived experiences are heard and recorded, so much more evidence that that's happening, and the quality of that is improving. So kind of links in, but social workers being able to identify well what the issues, most pressing issues or immediate issues are for children. So that kind of direct work with children, but also connecting in with that network of support for children as well. So professionals really wrapping around children and young people to understand what the issues are, and then looking at what actions are needed to be taken to support children and young people, which is the next point really in that presentation. So looking at how I know as a director what's happening in the service. So we have obviously had Ofsted that have come in and done a monitoring visit, but we are continuing to look at our own practice, so kind of really shining a lens on what work is undertaken through our quality assurance framework. So each month there's a number of practice learning reviews that are undertaken across the service by Kathy, by myself, by Juliet. Every level of management will undertake a practice learning review, and that's really a kind of a deep dive spotlight on a particular children's case as well. And we take our learning, we collate the learning from that, we collate kind of the findings from that, and that information is then used to shape and develop future practice as well. But also where there's issues that have been found through a practice learning review, that those issues, we call it closing the loop. So we make sure that the issues, the actions that have been identified are closed as well. So making sure that we cover that off for children and their plans. We have a number of children living in unregistered children's homes. We have been transparent about that with Ofsted notification when that arrangement's been made for a child. And actually the oversight and the scrutiny of that. So being able to reassure Ofsted that whilst we have situations where children are in these placements, and when I mean it's myself and my management team meet on a weekly basis to review the plans for those children, to look at risk, but also ensure that we're having discussions with commissioning colleagues about looking at alternative arrangements and where we can move children on, making sure that we do that as quickly as we can. A similar situation for children in supported accommodation as well. They're closely monitored, and the service is supporting providers to register with Ofsted as well. Effective oversight through our IRO service. So Kathy's spoken about recruitment, and I think one of the most successful areas for recruitment, permanent recruitment, has been into our IRO service. Sorry, it's quite a mouthful. And I think we've got a permanent IRO service now, and that's really important in terms of that consistency, that scrutiny of children's plans, and somebody seeing that child's journey through as well. And really strong feedback around children's rights and participation of children in decision making about their own lives is a priority of the service. We've talked quite a lot about recruitment and retention of the workforce, so I'm not suggesting that I go over that, because people will be hearing what we've already spoken about this evening. So just to look at our next steps, our plans for children, what we want to happen. So whilst there's been progress that's been identified by Ofsted, you'll see throughout the presentation there's the words at the bottom. We need to stretch ourselves, we need to look outwards and forwards and be proactive. So when we're thinking about the next steps, we want to ensure that we're achieving permanence for all children in care. So each child has that stability, security and love from placement where they can't be looked after by parents or immediate family. We really want to look at our local sufficiency. So we want to reduce the number of children that are living more than 20 miles away from home. So working with our commissioning colleagues to develop our sufficiency strategy is a key priority. Proactive social work. So making sure that we really continue and build on those strengths in practice about understanding children's complex needs, and supporting the workforce to kind of to grow and develop and kind of ensure that they have the best knowledge and skills to deliver what's required. Spoke about engaging with key partners around the sufficiency strategy, and then extending our corporate and collegiate accountability as well. In terms of quality assurance, so we want to grow and develop what we're doing. So making sure that when we're doing those monthly audits or those practice learning reviews, that we're talking to families, we're talking to children, we're talking to young people, we're hearing their feedback and bringing that back into the service. And increasing the involvement of partner agencies with the audit process across the system. So some service areas are having multi-agency audits. We're not doing that across the whole service, so we see that as our next step really in terms of that quality assurance, and making sure that our care planning is holistic. And then again, we've covered recruitment and retention, so that continued focus and progress on recruitment and retention of staff. You know, we really want to ensure that our workforce is primarily permanent, and we've still got a little way to go with that. And we know that there's more work to do around reflective supervision for our social workers as well. So really improving the quality and that analysis and chance to reflect on the child's journey to inform the next steps as well. But
Thank you so much. Clearly, there's been a lot of work that's gone into this area. Any questions at this point? Yes, Councillor Morel.
Thank you. It does sound like you've done a huge amount of work in a very small space of time. So very, very well done. This is really more a clarification. So you're talking about practice reviews and closing the loop. And would you say that that's quite a reactive thing by necessity, that actually you just need to make sure that all the basics are covered? How would we make sure that, and what would it look like if social work practice was perfectly proactive? I know it's an ideal world, it's an aspiration, but what might it look like? Yeah, so interesting questions. I think right, I'm just going to kind of answer that question from my perspective. So, and views that are shared with Kathy and Juliet, I'm sure we have to. We've got to quality assure our work, and I BCP weren't particularly good at that. When we had our ILACS inspection, I think that was an area of weakness. So a quality assurance framework's been developed. That's rolled out, it's becoming business as usual, and people are valuing that. And I think there's two strands to it. So the closing the loop, we absolutely need to do that, because we will be identifying some gaps in practice, which is really important in terms of making sure that we are being the best corporate parents that we can be. But also there's good things that come out of PLRs, out of that audit process, where we can share really good practice. And just an example for me, where a social worker had done some really good direct work with a child and with their foster care around identity, and it was fairly simplistic. It involved looking at a world map, a globe, and identifying where this child came from, but really effective. And we can take some of those things from our auditing PLR processes and share that across the service as well. And I don't think there is a perfect social work world. So it is a continuous, we have to we have to learn continuously, and when we stop learning, I think that will be a worrying, well, it would be a worrying place for me as well. Thank you. That's incredibly helpful.
Okay, Councillor Ahmed. Thank you. And again, apologies for not looking at you while I'm asking my question. So the second page of the report highlights the issue that too many young people live a long distance from BCP because of insufficient choice locally, which I know you mentioned, and you said about the sufficiency strategy. I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about that strategy and what's being put in place to try and address this.
So every local authority's got a duty to have a sufficiency strategy. So it sets out how we will meet the needs of children and young people in care. And I think Ofsted highlighted, but we'd already highlighted within our own self-assessment that we needed to update our sufficiency strategy. So in respect of, and I'm sure this has been brought here before, but there is a national crisis in terms of available homes for children that can't be looked after within their own family network. So we find ourselves in a difficult and competitive process to source the right placements for children and young people. So that's not just in BCP, it's in every other local authority. I think where we're where BCP is doesn't help particularly in terms of location and availability. And when I think about kind of resources as well, and when you look at some of the, so there's, so within kind of northern, I'm going to, again, just this is my experience, but there's a concentration of children's homes sometimes in areas where property is cheaper. So that's a difficult, a bit of a challenge for us in BCP. However, I think in terms of what we're trying to do, so we are going out to providers. We're talking to providers that are local to us in terms of what their offer is, how can that offer be extended. bearing in mind that we want to have the best quality resources for young people as well. I think a lot of work is going on within fostering, so we know that for children that are looked after often achieve better outcomes in that family environment, so that's our priority. And I think we've got 70% of our total looked after children's population in foster care, so something that to be celebrated, but also that doesn't mean to say we're not going to rest on our laurels as well. So looking at our recruitment campaign, we increased our payments to foster carers at the beginning of this financial year. We are looking at other things that may well make fostering more attractive. I think alongside of that, we're looking at supported lodging, so accommodation for 16 to 18-year-olds, how we can develop our supported lodging scheme. You know, there's work going on in terms of Ofsted registration as well. So it's it's really difficult in terms of it's difficult because we are competing with other local authorities, but that doesn't mean to say that we're not, and we're not going to stop looking at how we can grow our services. I don't know if I've covered that as well as it's a really complex situation and it's difficult to kind of give a succinct response to.
Thank you. You have explained a lot more about it and given me a lot more information, so thank you. And just the other thing I wanted to ask, obviously this is a promising report. There's a lot of positives that we've discussed. I wondered if there was anything in it that surprised you or that you weren't expecting.
I mean, there's a short answer to that, and it is no, because I talked about self-assessment, and I think that we're continually assessing our service areas, so not just corporate parenting, across the board. And I think we were confident that and remain confident that we know our service well. We know our strengths, we know our areas for development, and I think for me, the findings from Ofsted and the report confirmed that we're on the right track. That there is further work to be done, but we're not selling ourselves short, and we're not blowing our own trumpet. We've got a really good grip and understanding, I think, of the not just corporate parenting across the service, but in this particular for monitoring visit, corporate parenting.
Thank you. Got a really quick question. The number of social workers that a child or young person will have within their time, has that average reduced, and are they getting more stability and permanence and that same person to see them through?
Yeah, we do track that because it's really important. And so we do track that, and so it is reducing. It's still not where we want it to be. So some children have more changes of social worker than we like, and that's for a variety of reasons. One is the way that we've set up in terms of how a child's journey goes through the system. So therefore, by the way we're set up, their change of social worker will happen. So if they come in the front door and then they end up as a child in care, they could automatically, through no social worker leaving, just end up with 2 or 3 social workers. But then if social workers leave, then we have to change the social worker. So it's not where we want it to be, but it is getting better, and it's getting better with the recruitment that we're doing. So, and also we need to think about whether the way we deliver our services, is it beneficial for the journey of the child, and that's something that we are definitely looking at.
Actually, I think that last sentence brings me then really neatly onto my next question about the benefits of the child. There's obviously the highlighting the third of the children being more than 20 miles away, but in some cases they need to go a lot further, not only because there could only be one particular placement in the country that would suit that particular child, or equally they need to get away from a particular family and therefore be in a new town or something. that third that's been highlighted, has those considerations been taken into place, or is that just a generic figure we've been given? And then with those adaptations and considerations put in place, what number would you like to get down to?
That magic number. Yeah, no, and that's a very good observation and a good question, because I think you can look at there are children who get placed with family members, but they might be in Scotland. So they're not placed near their postcode of where their family are, but they are in the right and proper placement for them. You will have unaccompanied asylum seekers who we have placed somewhere, but so we might have placed them in Southampton. So there's a variety, and as you say, there are a number of young people that we're placing in particular areas because we don't want them local to us. I'd also say that, so if you think about, if you come from the bottom of BCP, then 20 miles away from your home is kind of only up or outwards. It can never be down, and so you're restricted in, because by the sea in some ways in default. But so yes, some of those could be positive, some of those could be because of design, and we want those children not to be placed in BCP. But some of them are because there's, as Sarah pointed out, there's a national shortage of placements. And so those are the children that end up being placed, further away than we would like. But as Sarah says, we do try and monitor those placements and look to move those children as close as we can. And I would have to go back and find out what the magic number was, taking all those considerations as well.
Thank you. And again, I don't mean this critically. I read the report positively, but what I was reading between the lines is the will is there and the want is there and the ambition and the desire is absolutely complete and utterly there. And we recognise needs, but we can't always help. And again, I think it's that commissioning question with NHS. How far are you getting in those conversations and asking them to pull their socks up, lean in, provide support? That absolutely needs to be there. We can't do it alone as a local authority, can't do it alone with education. Well, how are you progressing proactively but constructively those conversations with partner agencies?
Yeah, and there is a lot of work going on in that area, both in terms of our discussions and relationships and partnerships with both education and also health. And with regard to the integrated care system, there is now place-based arrangements with health in terms of looking at place-based need, what that might look like, how do we move forward. And so early days, but it has been recognised, the need that BCP's need is probably different from Dorset's need. There are planned things that we should do together, but there are also emerging needs for different areas. And so that's been recognised. And so there is now some work, strategic work that's going on in terms of designing that place shaping of what that work should look like.
So the ICB and the ICS work is really slow. So when are you expecting that place shaping work to be completed?
What I can say is that we are fully involved, and we are supporting that work and really driving that work as we can. I can't say when. I mean, it's a bit like when will it be completed, because some things might change and some things might evolve. I know that there is a lot of work happening in that space from bottom up and also from top down, and so hopefully we'll meet in the middle at some. But there is work happening. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So the recommendation for this is for information and scrutiny, and thank you very much all the officers for the presentation and also for bearing with our questions. Thank you. Okay, so I've got a few actions that actually I think I will type up more neatly and then send them out, and then if everyone agrees, add them to the minutes. I think it's just information. So for example, that sufficiency strategy, etc., just to receive a copy so that we can just familiarise ourselves with that. We now come to agenda item 9, which is the portfolios holders update. Councillor Richard Burton.
Thank you, Chair. Start with, I'm not going to go through all my engagements that I did because, but there's three I'd like to just highlight because I thought you might be interested in. I finally got to visit the MASH, which I know I was trying to do for years when I was in your place, and it never happened. And I got to see Mosaic, that infamous piece of software actually working. And I was able to see stuff inputted, so I understand it a lot more now. And I also was able to speak to quite a few staff, permanent agency, and some people who were agency who have become permanent, and have some conversations. It's really good to actually find out from real people, why those choices were made. I was at the Southwest Regional meeting with Kathy last Friday, I believe it was. It seems a long time ago now. 15 local authorities in the Southwest region, most of the portfolio holders and corporate directors of children's services were there. It goes all the way from the Scilly Isles up to Wiltshire. We are one of the corners of it. It was interesting because I could tell that the same issues were there. And there's also that feeling trying to get the Southwest to work together, so that Southwest region becomes a destination for children's services, and we will benefit from that because being part of it. I visited the 333 hub. I know quite a few people here also got to visit that. I just wanted to highlight because those people who visited know, but the 333 hub is in the middle of Bournemouth. It's for care experienced young people, and it's a place to go. You have to have a special knock to get in the door, or something like that. Anyway, and it provides support, place to go, and particularly support and advice. And I know a lot of young people very much appreciate it, and they're looking at building that up. A few things that the committee might like to be made aware of. This has changed actually since this afternoon. I said the SEND accelerated timeline paper is coming to Cabinet probably at the next Cabinet meeting. At the beginning of this meeting, we actually got the link to the, and yes, it is. It's at the next Cabinet meeting. So just to, anybody can read that. Anybody can come to Cabinet either physically or virtually. So anybody in this committee, if you feel like saying something, asking some questions there, it's not just the chair. Anybody can. Just aware that the DFE assurance visit we do probably end of October, and the next Ofsted monitoring visit, I know we mentioned this before, visit 5, the penultimate one, also probably end of October, early November, and it's likely to focus on care experienced young people. We don't know that certain, but it's something that you might want to. And finally, a plug for Youth Parliament, because I know they're doing some work doing a training session. Now I know I said training session because for elected members, when it's like we don't have the date yet, but when it's on, I will be emailing out to try to encourage lots of councillors to come. I'm hoping. No pressure here, but I am hoping that this committee will be well represented.
That would be amazing. That's good.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I don't know if you could hear that. I didn't have a microphone on. Thank you very much for joining us online. It was lovely to see you. Thank you. So that brings us to the close of the meeting. It's 19:43, and my thanks again for those who've attended both virtually and in person. Thank you.